Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Now, Anne-Marie, as you know, among other things, I'm a musician who's kind of rediscovered my music over the last 5 years or so after my brother gave me a wonderful Christmas gift. And we've had on occasion, you know Sam Page, he was on the show one time. He's a pianist, right? We've had occasional artistic things going on, but we haven't had one in a while. So we're kind of due, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm excited to hear more about this.
Right, because our guest today, Devorah Brinckerhoff, is a professional artist who also offers a class, a modality that's surrounded by art. We're going to learn all about that. It's going to be kind of fun. So, Devorah, welcome to the program. And how are you doing out there in Oregon today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Nice intro there.
We're glad to have you. Yeah. And like we were chatting about before we got started, I did actually live for a year in the southern part of Oregon in Medford at a time when it was quite different from what it is right now. But it was an interesting experience to be out there. That was my breakaway from home experience. It was my first time moving away and living someplace significantly far away. I mean, I lived on the East Coast, and you actually lived on the East Coast as well, so you know what that's like. Making that cross country move like that.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It only lasted about a year. It didn't work out well, but you know, it's like any experience. You pick up stuff along the way. But I remember it. I remember it quite well. Yeah. So anyway, tell us a little bit about your experience. I mean, because like I said, you lived in Vermont. You were telling us before, and then you ended up moving to the West Coast. I'm sure there's a story associated with that. And I also want to encourage you on a particular point. We love all the crash and burn stories. So if there's a crash and burn story built in, don't skip over that part, okay?
There are so many. Well, how do I choose which crash and burn?
Well, it's up to you. I mean, you get to pick the one that whatever one's jumping out at you, that's the one to tell.
So I actually lived in Europe before I came out west. So I had this fantasy of falling in love with an Italian man and living as an expat for the rest of my life. That did not happen. I ended up in Prague for just under a year, and it was at the time right after it opened, and they hated Americans and probably still do, but it was a tumultuous time for me in my own life, and there was a lot of crashing and burning that happened there. It brought me back home somewhat with my tail between my legs, and then I landed there for a short while, and then lived with my brother, and then came back home, and then met my now husband, and we moved to Washington, D.C., and then Seattle, and then Utah, of all places, and then back out to the Pacific Northwest, which I have to say is just perfect for me because I love the rain. So, and I don't love 20 below, so it's really good.
Yeah. And that you just named the two things that are very, very different between Vermont and Portland, Oregon. No doubt about that.
Yeah. I have never forgotten. I get attracted to it because I really love the snow, and Utah had a lot of snow when I was there. But shoveling the snow isn't so fun, or it is in its own little way, but it can really take 4 hours out of your morning.
Easily. Yes.
Easily.
Yes.
Easily.
Yes, I know that one very well. And like you said, Portland doesn't really get a cold winter. I mean, it gets winter, but it's not like a New England winter.
No, nothing like it. I'm not sure I could handle a New England winter anymore. I've acclimated to it gets to be 32, and I'm like, wait a second. What's happening?
Enough. We don't need any more than that, right?
Yeah. So I'm very happy out here. Yeah, it's great.
And how did you end up in the artistic realm? Because that's really the core of what we're going to be talking about today.
That has been a part of me for as long as I can remember, being creative. I mean, we're all creative. I know that people sort of balk at that, but I really challenge it when people say they're not. I think as children, as babies, we come in creative, and creativity is just play and exploration, and we know how to do it. It's an intrinsic part of who we are. We get trained away from it. It's easy to dismiss. We certainly devalue it in our culture. So I ended up like that was the only thing I could do. I'm a very dyslexic person. I had a terrible time learning how to read. I did not do well in school. Academically, though, later on, I discovered I have a mind in here to think about things deeply. So I went to art school and followed that path pretty straight and narrowly, got into galleries and was represented there for a long time. And then felt pretty like people are like, oh, you're so successful or you must be so happy. And I really wasn't happy. I felt like it was never enough. And what felt so more meaningful was engaging with people who felt something when they saw my work. And I started having much deeper conversations about what's going on in other people's lives. And my own life really took a sour turn, and creativity was always there to catch me. And so that is how it's become like a mission.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Well, you're bringing to mind a story of my own from when I was in first grade. I had a first grade teacher who literally is so popular that today classmates of mine are still in touch with her. She's in her 80s right now, but they just love her.
Oh.
She had that kind of connection with everybody. And when my parents went in for the parent teacher conference, I did pretty well in school throughout all my years, and that started right in first grade. And apparently, Spinzer wanted to balance out the report a little bit. So she told my mom that I would never be very creative.
Oh, ouch.
And the reason I mentioned that is my mom didn't tell me that right away. She told me that something like, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 years, something like that after it happened, because she didn't want to poison my mind with it. But I did a lot of very logic, left brain oriented stuff throughout school and after school. But I was also a musician, and I became a writer, and I started doing all these other creative things and enjoyed a lot of the ones that I was doing, still do today. And every time that I get into a new creative project, there's a little piece of me that says, Miss Spinzer, got that one wrong.
Nice. And I'm so glad that your mother chose not to share that with you.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Yeah, that was a smart decision on her part.
Yes.
My mom was a pretty good person. She really was. But yeah, I always think about that whenever I think about creativity. And then I also think about like you're saying, there are a lot of ways that our culture represses creativity. We're actually in a stage right now. I'm kind of curious on what your take is going to be on this, but we're in a stage right now where creativity is coming out whether we want it to or not. It's almost like it's up against this massive resistance, and the resistance is saying, you can't come in anymore. And the creativity says, you want to bet?
Totally.
It's a very different vibe from when I was quite young. It's a very, very different feeling.
Yeah, I think it's really that road from the head to the heart, really, that's happening, and that creativity is a very heart-based process, like experience, right? And so as we're finding confusion and dissatisfaction and lack of meaning and purpose, like we're asking the larger question, like there's got to be more. And that's I think that's creativity. And I think it's moving from the heart rather than, or learning how to keep them in sync with each other, coherent, mind and body, mind and heart. So
yeah, that coherence is a big concept right there.
I think people are using it a lot to heal now, because I remember there's always talking therapies, and I remember hearing about art therapy, but now there's music, there's dance, and there's just so much more creativity around healing, which I just think is wonderful.
Yeah, a lot of tools in the toolbox. I hope that there's something for everyone. That's really
there's certainly more choice.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think it's also true that more and more people are incorporating creativity into their daily lives in ways that they never had before. I mean, Anne-Marie, I'm thinking, for instance, about some of the conversations you and I have had both on the show and off the show about what's going on with your career path. I mean, you're basically working in IT, but the level of left brain that you do is actually pretty minimal compared to the right brain. I mean, you're doing a lot of creative stuff working with the people that you work with. They're the left brain types, right? but you're
Yes.
almost like the balancing influence.
Yeah, for sure. And I do a lot of like the mental health stuff and the equality stuff, and just try and bring a different kind of perspective and balance into things, because I'm way more creative. I used been writing since before I could walk.
And it's sustained.
It's always been my way.
Yeah. I think more people are recognizing that. They may not call it creativity, but they're recognizing that side of their personhood. So,
well, and I actually think it's really everywhere. Like, we just don't notice it. Making your cup of coffee in the morning is creative. When you make dinner out of what's in the fridge, it's creative. When you get dressed, that's creativity. If you're walking from point A to point B, you're moving through space. That's creativity. We just don't pay attention. And I think when we start paying attention to creativity, you will discover that it is absolutely everywhere, that our definition of creativity is very limited. Like, we just think it's the arts. It's everywhere. And when you tap into it, you're really expanding your own well-being and self-empowerment.
Yeah. Well, one of the topics that comes up here on the show a lot, mainly because it was the way the show originally started. This show started 13 and a half years ago, when I was first learning about and exploring the law of attraction. So that's where the whole original concept came from. And that field of conversation includes ideas about, well, how do you manifest what you want to manifest into your life, and where are the blocks coming from, and all that kind of stuff. When you get more and more into what I like to call the LOA mindset, you're getting into the realm of creativity. That's literally what you're doing. You're breaking out of the restraints of the non-creative side of life, and you're tapping into your own connection to who you are, but also what you create and how you create. Because at the end of the day, as spiritual beings, we are primarily creators. We don't necessarily think of it that way, but I mean, part of my belief system is we created all of this. We created this entire life. We created this entire universe. We did it as not just individual. It's not like there was one individual. I am going to declare the universe. It wasn't like that. It was all of us working together in all of our human and non-human forms, creating this universe. And the creation is ongoing. So, I mean, I think we're now to the point where people are realizing creativity, like you said, it's not just the arts. It's like everything that we do is creative.
And when I grew up in a very non-religious household, and anything spiritual was like not okay. And so to have spiritual language or even acknowledge spirituality took me a long time to feel comfortable doing. To use the word divinity felt like, really scary. And in the last 10 years or more, I've been much more comfortable just saying, like, this idea that we're evolving toward divinity. Like, I'm like, no, we are divinity evolving, right? So we're creating that known consciousness constantly, which, like what you're saying, is creativity. Like, consciousness and creativity are one and the same. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in fact, if you try to separate them, that's where you get messed up.
Exactly. And so I'm like, it's not that hard. Like, when people are like, yeah, I don't have a creative bone in my body, I'm like, somebody taught you that. And then you're like, everything is taught. And how do you like walk it back to your earliest memories of play? And that's your creative language. And so that's a good place to start. But, I just think that creativity it's a superpower, and we're born with it, and we don't use it, and we don't even know to use it. So that's my mission. Use it. No,
that's a good mission. I like that. I mean, well, you're also, you work with people. You have let's talk about the soul portraits, because I think that's what I'm kind of aiming at right now. Explain to people what that is.
So, like I was just sort of talking about, that everything is learned. So our identity is learned based on our early lived experience, right? And so we start piling in these ideas about who we are, and we don't know it. We just are sponges. And so, as for myself, I'll just use myself as a guinea pig. Like, at a very, very young age, I was convinced that I was just bad and going to hell. Even though I didn't go to church, I knew about hell and damnation and demons and all of that.
It
I'm
does get out there.
It sure does. It's like this felt energy in for generations, right? Like, So I didn't know what to do with that other than feel bad and feel scared. Like I was pretty
Sure.
scared. And so I was just like, well, I'm in trouble basically. Like, how am I going to live in this world thinking the way I think about myself? And so that just compounded, and I would start to make terrible decisions that reinforced the idea that I was bad. And I went down this sort of vicious cycle that just reinforced itself until I landed in Prague, where I was like, I don't want to be alive anymore. And it would be really nice just to leave this earth. And I sat there really, it was a freezing cold night. And I was dressed for summer essentially. And I was like,
Oh,
well, if I just
lovely.
smart, and if I just lean back, nature will take the rest for me. And there was something in me that was like, no, get up. And, this is back in the day with payphones, and I was miles outside of town, and all the public transportation was no longer running. And somehow I got back to a friend's house and they drove me back. But, and that started this, like, I need to start making different choices, and I need to really look at who I am. And that's a very scary thing to do because I was afraid of what I would find. So I only kind of half-assed did it enough to like get away from that squirrely feeling of, I don't know how to deal with who I am.
Well, especially
And
if I don't know if it was the first time, but if it's the first time you're doing it, that's really scary. The very first time.
Yeah. I didn't know it was the first time I was doing it. I was asking the big questions and I really didn't have the answers. And my father has a PhD in philosophy and my mother's a biochemist and researcher. And so I had very, very academic, very intellectual parents, and I was very emotional. And so sort of oil and water. And so I didn't know how to approach those things, but I did slowly, and I did it through creating art. Like this was after art school. And the more stuff I made, the more I was releasing stuck energy in my body without really knowing it. And the more I did that, the better I felt. And the better I felt, the more I did it. And so there we are, we're turning that dial in the opposite direction.
Right.
Soul portraits came at another time in my life. I'd always used mixed media, but not exclusively. Like I was trained as an oil painter and a figurative oil painter at that. But I started adding personal materials into the background of my paintings. And I was like, yeah, that kind of hits a spot that I don't know how to speak about. I'd been in therapy for years. The therapists are like, I could feel when I bumped up against a therapist's judgment or bias about things that they hadn't dealt with or weren't comfortable with.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I had a lot of shame and I didn't know how to tell the truth about what I had done in my life and the choices that I made. And so, and because I didn't feel like I could say it, I could put the written story down and I could rip it up and glue it onto a canvas. And 3 hours later, that felt like 5 minutes, I felt very different. I had deconstructed my story and I had reconstructed what I wanted it to be on canvas. I wrote over the top of it and then I painted over that. And it just was an invitation to who I wanted to step into and what I was ready to let go of, while still staying the bridge between who I had been and who I was becoming. And that's always now, right? You're always the bridge between your past and your future. And that's something to embrace. What I teach can get a little uncomfortable for people, but it's the anticipation of finding out something you don't want to find out about yourself, which is almost never the case. And in my own experience, I just found I was so scared. I was so scared of what I would find looking under the hood. And what I found was love. I just found this like teeny tiny ember of light and love. And I hate that coin, like everybody says, but that just popped out of my mouth. So a little cheesy, but
There's nothing cheesy about it.
It was such a relief. Like I was like, oh, wait a second. Like I'm not as bad as I thought I was. And I'm not as bad as everybody said I was. Like, I had been excommunicated from my family. I had been sued by my parents and my husband's parents. Like, there was all this evidence of my worthlessness. And so that's what I was ripping up. And I was doing it out of desperation. And I had no idea that under all of those layers was just peace and acceptance, and more than anything, self-forgiveness. And you can't teach that. And it's not about forgiving anybody else. It's not about like condoning harm. It's about really meeting yourself wherever you are and accepting who that is. So that's what soul portraits are. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but now that's
and Maria, I don't know if you're noticing what I'm noticing here, but when she was describing her process for doing a soul portrait, the first thing that came to my mind is she found a way to artistically journal.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Is that what you're getting?
It was all. Right? It was. I just felt the flow.
Yeah,
it was all just flowing out, and it was all coming out, and whatever needed to come out was going onto that.
I mean, it sounds exactly like journaling, but she was doing it with artwork. Yeah, exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant way of doing it. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, I wasn't good at finding words, and so I let my materials speak for me. And in doing so, like, I witnessed all of those different versions of myself, so I could hold a letter from eons ago from an ex or whatever, or family, or a loving card from my mom that didn't track with being sued. Like, and you're holding all these things that you can't quite make sense of. And like you said, it's a visual representation of all those different layers that I didn't know how to find, let alone articulate. And this was how I did it.
Wow.
I think what I like about it as well, in the fact that you can write words and you can stick things, and then you can paint over it, and then you can stick stuff. It doesn't have to be seen. It's just out there, and it's in your picture. It's a bit like your life, isn't it? Nobody can see that everything that's been going on in your life, and that's individual to you, but it's out there.
Well, it's out of your body, right? Like, all of those experiences, they get stuck in our body. And my body was so full of toxicity and limiting beliefs and false identity that I couldn't possibly step into who I wanted to step into or have the life I wanted to have without addressing all of the versions of myself that I had been. And so portrait after portrait after portrait was just peeling back those layers, but not as a way to shame and not as a way to relive it, but really to revisit, to acknowledge, to witness myself. And I was the only one who needed to know what was there. And it was so empowering. Like, it was just so empowering, and you don't need somebody else to understand. And that was huge for me, because I'd been searching my whole life for somebody to like see me, to understand me, so that then I could feel whole or loved. That's just a bunch of bullshit, right?
Yeah, but that's what you did. I mean, the way I understand journaling is about a combination of releasing and addressing the stuff that's important in your own life. Addressing for the purpose for releasing, perhaps, is the better way of saying it. And that nobody ever has to see it. You don't even have to read it yourself. You don't have to actually do anything with it. The whole purpose is just to go through the experience of getting it out there on paper as a way of just interacting with it and learning to feel good about it and all that kind of stuff. And you're doing the exact same thing. You did it kind of by feel. You felt your way to doing the exact same thing, but through your artistry, through your ability to create portraits and so forth. Which, for somebody like me who's like, has trouble drawing a stick figure, that's really impressive.
You can draw stick figures. People do it all the time, and it's great. It doesn't matter what it looks like, because it's just the process. And the ripping up it's really fun. Like, people can get really afraid to rip up like a wedding photo after a divorce or part of their wedding dress or whatever. Like, there are so many stories, and people know, like, they just know. But they don't know that they know. And so when they realize that they already know, there's this click that happens where they're like, wait a second, I can do this. Like, I can do this. And therapy is great, and therapists help. And I'm not dissing on therapists. I married a therapist. But there's something really powerful about meeting yourself, and that I love.
That's really good. By the way, I give you credit for my ex was also a therapist. I give you credit for because therapists are great to be married to, but they're a challenge. It's both. You get both sides of it.
It's true.
And you know as well as I did, the reason they became therapists is they were trying to figure out these things for themselves. That's why they did it, you know?
Totally, totally. And so when there's that barrier and the authority of like, I know because I have a PhD, great. And there's all of this other stuff that exists underneath the surface that we don't know. And it comes out in journaling. It comes out when you're drawing your stick figure. It does not matter. It's not meant to be beautiful. It's meant to get out. And so, yeah. And as my husband, who was very, very intellectual, he got super sick about 7 years ago and had to stop working. And it's been really interesting the way he's had to like, and he has seizures, and every time he has a seizure, his brain goes offline for like a week to 3 weeks. And then over time, he hasn't been able to rely on what he could rely on before so well. And what has been taken away from him is that cognitive ability, but then it turns on this other side of him that is like the most beautiful thing to watch unfold. It's scary sometimes and frustrating sometimes, but there's something, which is what I think you were saying in the very beginning, like creativity is like forcing itself into our lives. And if we're resisting it, it's like, nope, we're going to do all this stuff so that you're forced to enter into a different way, a different lens of moving through the world.
I'm sure he did not want to do it the way he's had to go about doing it. But I'm curious, has he been able to make progress? Has he been able to embrace it? Or is he still kind of in a stuck mode?
I think he has made huge progress embracing it. Like, and so he's a bit of an unusual human in the first place because he's a very sensitive and emotional person. It's part of why we like totally connected. And we could really see each other's stuff, but we were completely trauma bonded. So detangling that sort of a meshed way of partnership has been the biggest bonus of him getting sick. And it's just sort of a surrender. Like I have to be something else. So he is becoming that something else, which is extremely uncomfortable. But yes, I think he's doing an amazing
job. And it could be a challenge for both of you. I mean, it's a good thing that you both apparently have that empathetic side, that deeply emotional side, which is really great for getting through. But still, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It just means that you have the ability to do it.
Right. And there's an appearance of doing it too. Like there's an appearance of being emotional, but still keeping yourself separate from the emotion. And that's such a slippery slope. Go ahead, Anne-Marie. I didn't want
No, I was just wondering, do you think it helped in the fact that, you went through your own thing, having to peel back those layers and not knowing what you were going to find? It's almost similar, just a different way of forcing it on you. And do you think that helped you in the relation of helping each other?
Yeah, I think we could see it. I mean, so 15 years or so ago, like when the shit really hit the fan, we had discovered that our children had been sexually abused. And I, at the same time, I didn't know that was my history until I got pregnant for the first time. And so I had just started unraveling my own history when my second child and son was acting really weird. And I was like, no. So I really resisted dealing with it. I had been moving through it myself. And then I was thrown into the deep end with trying to give my kids a different experience of how to move through trauma in a way that allowed them to get it out of their body, while also being really afraid of it being in my body, right? It was a really weird thing to hold. And when we figured out who it was, and we had told my husband's family because we chose to live near them, it got so bad. Like there was a complete line drawn in the sand. Sexual abuse is definitely a taboo topic. And it was way too close to home. And so they went on the attack. which I get, right? I totally get. In the moment, that's what started the lawsuit and my letter of excommunication, and I was devastated, right? Like, I did not know how to hold that kind of grief and loss, and that is when I finally ripped everything up. I had a lot to rip up at that point, and so, right, like, those are really, I know what it's like to try and fly on the wings of grief like that, while trying to keep your kids, like, happy and safe and give them some kind of normalcy. But we were existing, in such a victim lens, and that was me, right? Like, I was totally in the victim mindset, and that then got translated onto my kids, in the most understandable way, but also pretty destructive. And so detangling that, and then my husband started having these uncontrollable seizures that are, like, terrifying. And so there was, like, trauma after trauma and victim after victim. And I was just like, this is everywhere. And how do we stop living like this? And I mean, that's a choice, right? And so I totally forget what your question was, and I went off on a tangent there.
That's all right. That's what rabbit holes are for. You start off with one thing, and all of a sudden you're down.
I have no idea where we were.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think you answered it. It was more about, like, did your experience help you relate to your husband's experience? But it sounds like as a family, you went through, you rode those waves all together.
Heartbreak was my point, is that there was so much heartbreak, and, like, yes, so we could continue to see each other and support each other, but we weren't necessarily happy, and we had to come back and find a way to trust each other through the heartbreak, and we had to really address that differently. And we had very different ways of doing it. And mine was always in the studio. And for a long time, my husband was very stoic in that way. Even though he felt it, he didn't know how to be somebody who had any problems. Like, he was very used to not having problems.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge right there, because anytime you're talking about sexual abuse, we're not even in problem land anymore. We're in an entirely different realm.
Yeah, and it really distorts your lens, right? And so I really had to untangle that, and it made my life a living hell until I understood, like, why did I feel so, like, I felt like I was a 6-year-old girl walking home from school telling my older brother that I think I had a rotten apple in my stomach. And I had no idea, right? So in hindsight, I was trying to get at something, like, I'm picking up leaves and he's collecting water chestnuts, and, like, it was so sweet. But he doesn't know, we didn't know what we were doing, right? So life takes you on this crazy path, and untangling that is awesome. Like, it is very empowering if you're willing to do it, right? If you're willing to look under the hood.
Well, you're touching on what I think is probably the question of the era that we're in.
True.
Are you willing to deal with? Because there's a whole lot of people, I would say a significant majority of the people, who are not willing to look beneath the hood. They're not willing to deal with this stuff. They would much rather be in the pointing of the finger and the blame mode and all that kind of stuff. The last thing they want to do is actually admit that they have a role in the whole thing. And if you suggest to them that they do, watch out. And by the way, I like putting my finger in there. I like stirring up the bee's nest sometimes, so I get stung at times. It's all right. I'm used to that. But that's one of the ways that I really discover how prevalent it is. And yet, I think I can honestly say, compared to, say, when I was quite young, the amount of people who are open and who are considering experiences outside of their own experience in a way that says, I was never sexually abused, perhaps, but I can understand somebody else going through something like that. And maybe I can hardly even imagine it, but I can at least be empathetic to it. And then perhaps it points back to me in terms of not that I was abused or that I abused somebody, but it reminds me, well, what things do I have to work on? That's the kind of vibration I see. I see people being influenced by each other, and many people saying, okay, I'm going to embrace whatever this this trauma is, or whatever the situation is that I'm dealing with that I don't like, and I'm going to find a way to grow through it. And some are more successful than others. Some are less successful. I've encountered people who all they're wanting to do is the external stuff, and they don't really get very far. But boy, they try really hard to do the external stuff. And then I encounter people who also do the inner stuff, and they have even more interesting story. Well, a lot of that has to do with doing a show like this. You get people that's what comes out of the show, right? You don't tend to get the abusers coming on. They don't really join the show. That's just not what they do.
Well, but what if they were invited to? Like, I've sat across from a lot of people who have caused harm, sexual harm to their own children. And there is no black and white line. Like, in no way, shape, or form do I ever condone it. And like, why? There's so many reasons why. And part of talking to people who, like, there are people who were born attracted to children, and their first crush, whether it's at 9 or whatever, stays the age. And that's not something that they asked for. And it causes so much pain. But if they talk about it, they're demonized immediately.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't have the solution to that. And I definitely don't want to see children harmed at all, ever, or anyone for that matter. Any vulnerability in there, I'm like, can we please eradicate? And we all cause harm, and we all receive harm. How do we deal with it is the question. How can we, like, really, what's the word? Integrate our experiences so that they don't come out sideways. And if we reject them, they will come out sideways. And so my whole thing is to lean in, to embrace it and accept it and forgive it. And how else? Because when I felt like the terrible person and I was making terrible choices and causing a lot of harm and damage, the worse I felt, the more damage I caused. And so we've got to stop it somewhere. And especially in this day and age, we have all these bumper stickers on Teslas that are like, I bought this car before I knew what an asshole he was, or whatever it is. And I'm like, this is so confusing to me, because, like, what is that bumper sticker saying? And when you demonize him, but you love the car, like, like, what is it serving? And we swing so far back around. I'm like, well, you're no better, right? It's no better. So, anyhow, there's my political 2 cents. But
hey, we don't go too much into political, but what you're really touching on is actually quite poignant, because we do live in an era where we're challenged on beliefs and thoughts and experiences in ways we were never challenged before. I mean, you can say a lot of positives and negatives about the modern 21st century. One of the biggest positives is you're in Portland, I'm in Connecticut, she's in Swindon in the UK, and we're having a conversation like we're in each other's living room.
I know, I love it.
This is amazing.
It is. It's so cool.
But by the same token, it's also how we are being connected to each other in ways that it's very uncomfortable. I mean, you just described how you can have people who are both abusers and recipients of abuse having the same conversation at the same time. That wasn't even possible 50 years ago. That wasn't even on the table. And now it's happening. Now, is there trauma associated with it? Yeah, there's trauma associated with it.
Totally.
And it's challenging, but it's new. It's a new phenomenon.
I think that's true. And I think that I've always, like, the thing that I get super excited about with what you're saying is that whether or not the conversation is happening, energetically, those two people, the abuser and the one who's abused, are tethered forever until there's an acknowledgement and hopefully an actual genuine apology for the harm caused, because it sets both people free. And so that energy is so much of what I talk about, because when you're writing a letter, the energy of the version of you who wrote the letter is in the letter, right? And so when you're addressing that version of yourself, you're witnessing it and you're also dispersing it. You're making it more digestible when you rip it up. And so it's not about denying the energy. It's about being able to change your relationship to the energy of who you have been. And so, like, I had this crazy crush for 13 years. Like, it was absurd. And I held onto it without even knowing, and I ended up making a soul portrait for him, and it just dissolved whatever energy I had. Like, it was just gone.
Wow.
And I was like, "Whoa." I didn't even know that I was carrying it the way I was carrying it, but it's that energy. And, like, I don't know what he feels on his end. I don't think he was carrying the same kind of energy that I was around it,
Sure.
but but it releases both people. And I just think when we address that energy, when we really allow it to have a voice, it changes lives.
What was that one of the first times that you tried this soul portrait thing that you developed? No, that was later
No.
on.
Yeah, that was later on. I needed to work on myself, and so,
Uh-huh.
I had been creating soul portraits without knowing that they were soul portraits when I was in college. I just
Oh,
didn't know
okay.
what I was doing, and it was all the same thing.
Yeah.
So, it took me a long time to sort of clue into the power of my own creativity, and as I really started adding intention and awareness to it, I'm like, "Oh, wait a second. This is really powerful." And if it helped me, and I'm kind of stubborn, it can help a lot of people. And so therein
Mm.
lies the teaching and all of that stuff.
What was it like when you first came to the conclusion that not only was this soul portrait thing a thing, but that you wanted to share it? What was
Well,
that like?
I was scared, right? Like, I had been living kind of in a cupboard my whole life. I'd let galleries deal with sales. I felt really uncomfortable talking in front of people. Like, I remember winning some award and I turned purple and I was so embarrassed. I turned like all my hair in front of my face and it was on television. I was just horrified.
Wow.
And so this idea of being behind the scenes was much more comfortable for me. And so I was very, very nervous all the
Mm.
time and extremely uncomfortable. And I felt like an imposter and like, who am I to do this? And then people felt different, like they were having the experience that I was having, and that it changed the way the relationship that they had with themselves.
Mm.
And if we're holding on to things that we don't even know that we're holding on to, when we start engaging with them, our bodies take over and something else happens. And that's your intuition and that's like your wisdom, and you can tap into the universe, and I'm like, who wouldn't want to do that? So, like, yeah, it can be scary because you haven't done it before, but give it a try. And there's such a reward about knowing who you are, like really deeply underneath all the stories. Like, stories are great and we carry stories, and I don't bash stories. I love stories. I love my own
Mhm.
story. I love other people's stories. I love
Mhm.
telling stories. And we're not our stories. We're not our experiences. And this process really gives you a felt knowledge of that, that I think is really beneficial. And that benefit helped lead the carrot in front of me to say, like, yeah, I'm really scared, but I'm going to do this anyhow.
Okay, then that makes sense. And one
Mm.
of the benefits that often gets talked about where journaling is concerned is that journaling, among other things, will lead a person to develop a better sense of self-love, self-care, self-compassion, all that kind of thing. And the obvious question is, does the soul portrait, does that do the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience, is that people have fear going in and then they're like, "Oh, I wish I'd done this, 20 years ago after my
Mhm.
divorce or after that violent relationship," or like whatever it was. And yeah, it's very powerful.
Mm.
It's also
Without
not all that
words.
different.
Say that again?
I was just gonna say it's also not all that different from the kind of thing that happens with people who offer art therapy.
Yeah.
It's
Art
very
therapy.
similar. What you're describing, it's different, but it's similar.
Yeah, it's very similar. When people go into art therapy, they're drawing and painting about like a cognitive, I think of it as more cognitive, even though they're drawing and
Mhm,
painting, it has
mhm,
this goal, like I'm going to draw about my childhood.
mhm,
And when people come in, they're taking materials from their childhood. Like, the
mhm,
materials do the work for you. It's not it's not cognitive. Cognition or insights come later. Afterwards, when people look at what they've made, they'll see something and they'll be like, holy cow, I had no, like, for example, my husband had a girlfriend in middle school, and like for 3 years at the end of middle school and into high school, who they were like, she had all these plans. They were going to go to Stanford. They were going to get married. I mean, they're young and totally in love with each other. Anyhow, there was energy there for my husband that was left over that he didn't really think about, but he was going over his materials. We were moving and he had like letters after letters after letters from her, and he was reading through them, revisiting them, and just realizing the kind of conditioning that he had fallen into about what it means to be the boyfriend and what it means to be like a man and what it means to be the supporter. And meanwhile, the suppression that was happening internally was pretty overwhelming. And he became more and more distant from himself. And as he was going through all of this stuff and just thinking about how he learned about relationships and his parents' relationships, like it's so layered. But in a very intuitive way, he had ripped up a photo of her and also ripped up a photo of himself. And they were next to each other. And without thinking, he put them on to make a one face. And so I think it was his eyes and hair and her lower mouth and neck, and you couldn't really tell who was who. And it was just this like crazy intuitive reflection of their ridiculous enmeshment and unhealthy relationship. And then he ripped up a brain and put it next to her head. And, 20 years later, she died of a brain related.
Wow.
And it was just, it all happened at this intuitive level. And he looked down at it and he was like, holy shit, right? Like he didn't plan on that. But in doing it, discovered things about himself that he never would have gotten to otherwise. And that's the thing that I like about the creative process, whether it's music or, drawing and what I'm teaching, mixed media, whatever, or planting a garden, like you're somewhere else. And there's something to it that I just think is so cool. That's so much bigger than us.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any listeners, current listeners anyway, of the program who will go down the path that I'm about to describe. But I know that there are some who are on that path, so I'll mention them anyway. There are going to be some people who are going to hear that and they're going to say, ooh, there's a great way I can influence somebody else. I'll draw a picture of them and I can influence their outcome. And I love the fact that you said he had no concept of that. That was just not part of the thought process at all, because that really has nothing to do with what you were describing.
Yeah.
No. And it released some stuck energy inside of him that just, again, there's like this freeing feeling. And if somebody goes in with the intention, like voodoo doll, like it's just going to come back to them, right? Like, right. If your intent is to control or manipulate someone else, like you will be controlled and manipulated. Like you're inviting it to yourself. That's all you're doing. So if that's what you end up
doing, that's like, one of the ironic, there are people who do practice that. And I've actually talked to some, they talk about how it impacts them when they're doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, I had one on the show who she described herself as being in recovery from that. And that was literally the experience of, she realized pretty early on how every time that she was doing something like that, it was rebounding on her. And yet there was also an addictive quality to it because of that. Like you said, it was that belief that you can manipulate somebody else. There was both going on at the same time. And she ended up literally having to let go of that seeming power. It wasn't, I mean, in a sense, I guess you could call it a power, but it's also kind of a self-destructive power at the same time.
Right.
And she had to let go of that. And it was quite a journey for her.
Good for her. That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound fun, but it does sound, I mean, it's how we learn, right? It's how we learn about the world and the universe. And
well, none of the journeys we go on are fun, especially these crash and burn journeys. I have yet to have anybody though come onto the program who went through a crash and burn journey who said they wish that it never happened.
Right.
Everybody agrees that it was the best thing that ever happened. I remember the first time I experienced that was with my other co-host, Joel Elston. He was my 12th interview back in 2012. And he came onto the program and he talked about how he went through some absolute horrors, absolutely ridiculous horrors, and how it was the best thing that ever happened. And I remember the first time he described that to me, I'm sitting here saying, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right?
But over time, I've come to realize, my goodness, not only is it true, it is it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Literally, everybody going through these kinds of moments comes out the other side. They certainly don't want to go through it again. That everybody agrees. I never want to go through that again. But that's where we do our biggest learning. And so it becomes such a valuable experience, no matter how bad that trauma was.
Yeah.
It's astonishing.
Totally agree. Yeah. It's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fact that you've been able to tie that into what you're calling a soul portrait, where'd the term come from, by the way?
Well, I just think that, so for me, it was really about we get so covered over, right? We're disconnected from our soul in this world that we currently live in. And so how do we peel back all those layers and reconnect with our essence, soul, essence, power, divinity, whatever you want to call it? So the portraits themselves aren't soul portraits. It's more like a person portrait. And our soul is our soul is guiding us in terms, if we let it, right? And again, you have to allow for that, for yourself to stop thinking about it and trust that inner knowing, that inner wisdom, which it's like an addiction. Once you start doing that, it's hard to stop. It feels too good.
You offer a program. I mean, you guide people through this activity, right?
Yeah, I do. So I have a digital course that I offer. It's very accessible, and people, if they want more and they want to work directly with me, I do a lot of coaching on top of that. And I love actually working with artists too, who want to have a deeper relationship with the work that they make. So I love talking about people's paintings and their composition or whatever so for the visual stuff, mixed media, painting, drawing, I love geeking out about composition and negative space. I think it's really fun.
That's cool. I love that. Emery, I wanted to ask you earlier, and I forgot about it. I mean, we've talked certainly about how both of us have done journaling. Have you ever tried anything similar to the soul portraits?
I don't think I have, but I honestly, as you were talking, so many words kept coming into my head, and then you were saying this word, and I was like, yeah, I'm obviously like feeling this, because it just feels so freeing. And like you said, the word stuff a few times, and that was in my head. You know, like you say, people have held on to letters and photos, and we all hold on to this stuff, and actually it can feel like a heavy weight. So to me, it just felt so freeing to be able to rip it up, slap it on paper, put a picture next to it, cover it up, whatever you need to do. So yeah, just love. I haven't done it, but I really want to.
Yeah, you should try
it. Yeah, it sounds like we've got something that's on the bulletin board. Like this is something to be tried at some future date.
I would love to see it too. And I get people sometimes, they're like, can I text you while I'm doing it? I'm like, yes, of course you can. And so if questions come up and people just don't know how to let go, how do I rip? I'm like, well, give it a try. Like, you cannot mess it up. You can't mess it up. And even if you're like, oh, I didn't want to rip through that part of the letter, I'm like, then put it back together. I've had people sew paper. I've had people burn their portraits. Like, I've sewn paper, like, and it's just another layer. It's an expression of like the ways in which we're impacted by life. Like, I have scars all over my body and from surgeries and other like accidents, and I love every single one of them. And I'm like, there's a map of my lived experience. What a cool thing. And so when you make one of these, you're mapping your lived experience, and you get to decide how you're going to look at it. And to me, that's just, it's super powerful.
Yeah. To me, it sounds so much fun. And I just think I'd still be there 13 hours later, just still doing it. I'd have RSI, my shoulders are killed. It just sounds so freeing.
It is. Do it, Emery, and then show it to me. I'd love to see.
Well, since you're so open to the idea of people showing stuff to you, we should probably give people an idea how to reach you. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to show it to you.
Sure. Like, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and my name, Devorah Brinckerhoff, or Soul Portraits will get you to me. And I have a website, soulportrait.art, and free activities. There's an inner voice exercise that people can start with. And Yeah, I just want people to tap back into their creativity. They don't need me. If they want me, they can have access to me. If they don't, that's totally fine. They can do it on their own.
By the way, I love the fact that you got a .art top level domain. That's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, that was fun to get and easy. So I was like, okay, that worked.
I didn't even know art was a top level domain. And so that's good to know.
I didn't know it either. I didn't know. I think my husband got it. So kudos to him. He's good.
That's wonderful. Yeah. We have a couple of little traditions we like to do here. First and foremost was, well, thank you for joining us and also for sharing how to reach out to you. The digital program, I forgot to ask this. Let me divert to that for a second. Is that something that you do as a live thing? Is that something that's a pre-recorded thing? I mean, how does that work?
So the course, the digital course is pre-recorded. And if people want more, they can book a session with me, or they can book a group. So you can get a bunch of
you do
people
group as well.
Yeah. So if people have all suffered, the loss of a child, or a miscarriage, or death by suicide, or divorce, or, or they are celebrating 50 years of marriage and they want to make one together. So it doesn't all
actually makes some sense, because I can imagine anybody who's experiencing trying to do something creative like this, particularly if they're not used to being overtly creative, it can be intimidating. So to actually be able to do it live with somebody who can kind of guide you, I could see the value of that for somebody like that. That would be very valuable.
It's really fun, and it keeps me humble, because I forget that people get uncomfortable with like crayons and glue, and anyone can do this. It is literally 3-year-old skills, right? If you can rip paper and smear glue around with your finger or a brush, you're good to go.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's more about the letting go part, and that's the part that we adults struggle with, because we got all this baggage we've been carrying all these years that keeps getting higher and higher and higher with every year. So the older we are, the more is to let go. It's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Exactly. Well said.
So it isn't so much the 3-year-old skill, that part. Yeah, we know we got that part down. It's the other part. Can we do that part? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. And it feels really good. Once people get going, they're like, oh, this is great.
So getting back to our 2 traditions, first one, I like to always have Anne-Marie give us a little summary of how she ties the show together, because she's not only is she a co-host, she's also a former listener. And so she brings the listener perspective. That's why I like having her do this, because she has this really cool perspective. So Anne-Marie, what you been thinking about?
I've loved this. This is such a story of power, isn't it? You've had your time in Prague where you're at your lowest, and then you come home with your tail between the legs, you said, and you've just tried to pick yourself back up. And I got really empathic when you were on about like your children and the abuse that they suffered, and the mama bear in me was just like having your kids abused. You lost your support network, your family at the same time, and dealing with stuff yourself, but you preserved your peace in that whole thing, and you worked through it, and you worked on those triggers, and you did that to support your family and change the projection of your future. So I just loved that whole power bit. And then the nuggets that I took from that was, remember, you're not as bad as the thoughts in your head tell you are. Brilliant, because we're never as bad as this critical voice that we can get.
Oh yeah.
Change the relationship to your experiences to something that you can peacefully live with. Brilliant, because it's all about perception, isn't it? It's all about, you can deem this as bad, or is this a learning experience, or where is the beauty in this, or what can I deal with to make myself go forward? And then, are you willing to look beneath the hood?
It's nice to know the things you said actually came through and registered and made a difference.
Yes. And I'm like, but believe me, I was not, and still am not perfect. Like I made so many mistakes, and during that time too, right? Like if I could go back and change how I handled things, I would.
Of course, but that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of life, isn't it? Because nobody's perfect. Yeah. And you've been through all this, you've made your mistakes, you've had your messy bit, you've been through hard stuff, and you create beautiful art out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't consider myself to have had a good day unless I made at least one, preferably 10 or 20 mistakes during the day. I just wasn't even trying.
Touché, guys. That's a good point, right? Yeah.
One final thing I like to do with every show here, and somehow this seems particularly poignant with you today. I've been doing this now for a few years, but this one really seems poignant, because coming onto a podcast and talking about how you went through sexual abuse and how your children went through sexual abuse, that's hard to do. That's just plain hard to do. And you do it effortlessly. Well, I'm sure it's not effortless, but you make it look effortless. Let's put it that way. So I want to give you a lot of credit for that. But beyond that, you have, well, everybody who comes onto the show in one way or another is a giver more than a taker. That's just the nature of it. That's the nature of who's going to be a guest. And as a result, I'm sure this is the only podcast you've ever done. I'm sure you've done other podcasts. I'm sure you have other ways. You mentioned the Instagram. You mentioned the various ways that you do it through the social media. That's just become a part of how you do things. In the process of doing that, you are reaching people many times who you have no idea how they're going to use the information, but you keep doing it, which is one of the wonderful things about givers. And they keep giving no matter what. I noticed that we don't get a lot of credit for that. So that's why I like to wrap it up this way by saying, Devorah, on behalf of those people you've never met and you've never seen and never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't even know about, just because you're telling your story, you're sharing your experience, you're encouraging them to try something that they probably never even heard of before, and you just keep doing that over and over again. You're helping people in ways you don't even know about. On their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you are making a difference in this world.
Yes.
Thanks, Will. I really hope so.
Yeah, you definitely are. You can count on it. It's 100% guaranteed. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.